Time doesn't heal pain, but teaches us to bear it. If you're a man, then I know you've been through the worst pain of all, and that is to face all your problems alone with nobody beside you. Because whenever you try to open up about it, society shuts the door in your face telling you to man the fuck up. Why? Because you're a man, and you're just expected to solve all your problems on your own. I can only imagine all the hardships you had to go through and just expect to be okay. When people ask you how you're doing, you reply, I'm good, or my personal favorite, can't complain. Because the second you utter one word of complaint, judgment comes at your door. So what do? We keep everything in, bottling up every emotion until one day it blows up in our face, or even worse, it makes us take our own life. You see, according to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, there are 1.2 million attempts on suicide in 2020 alone. About 46,000 of Americans died by suicide, and men accounted for 70% of suicide deaths. In this video, I will explain why men go through this problem, and we are going to develop a comprehensive program dependent on three main principles: the mind, the soul, and the body. Most sex difference studies focus on two broad types of support: emotional support, which includes emotional sustenance and empathy. For example, this is someone listening to you and sympathizing for your problems. And secondly, instrumental support, which includes any tangible help from others. This is like your father giving you financial aid. The most commonly reported finding from these sex difference studies showed that men favored instrumental support, while females tend to seek emotional support. This leads to the assumption that all men are less able and less interested on relying on emotional support. Men also tend to have less social networks and less frequent exchanges of social and family relationships. I can tell you right now that I only have 2 friends and 1 family member that I can open up to for emotional support. What do you think would happen if they showed uninterest or they expected me to deal with my problem on my own? Do you see how normal it is for men to be lonely? Do you see how this can mentally fuck with us when nobody wants to listen? As a man, don't you feel like a burden when you choose to complain about your problems? The worst mistakes I've ever made was complain to people who couldn't handle my problems. I usually get 3 different scenarios. 1, they make me feel bad for complaining. 2, they made it completely about themselves, ignoring my problems. And 3, this is the worst one, they tell their social circle about my problems and I get judged even further, making me even more repulsive to the idea of ever opening up to anyone ever again. This leads to more loneliness, and as a man, you feel like there's nothing you can do other than bear it with time. I am here today to give you practical solutions on dealing with your mental health based on 3 principles. Because if we don't take matters into our own hands, then nobody will. I promise all of you, if you listen to all these 3 principles and try your best to apply them every day in your life, you will get better. Are you ready? Because you're about to change your life forever. Principle number 1, the domain of the mind. Each of us will face crisis. Our business may collapse, we go through a nasty breakup, we lose our jobs, we lose the people we love the most. This requires us to be fully present, sit and reflect, reject distractions, and summon mental resources to handle life's problems that it throws at us. This is not easy, but it's a necessity as a man. How much better would our lives be if we exercised these virtues of humility, patience, conviction, and mental toughness? The first thing I will ask you to do is to start journaling. Anne Frank came from a Jewish family. Just 24 days after her first journal entry, she was forced to hide in her father's attic in his warehouse with the rest of her family. They would spend the next 2 years in that attic hoping to never be found. Anne would write in her journal every time she felt confused, upset, or scared. She wrote in that journal as a form of therapy so she wouldn't unload her negative thoughts onto her family. One of the best lines she wrote in that journal was, "Paper is more patient than people." She used the journal to reflect how much nobler would people be if they took time to sit and reflect and weigh up the rights and wrongs of the day. Even Seneca, a Stoic philosopher, used to journal the evenings before going to bed. He explained to a friend that he examines his day and he doesn't hide nothing from himself. Then he explains the sleep that follows after that journaling session to be so sweet. Journaling is for the writer to slow their mind down and find peace within themselves. Journaling probes you to ask yourself the big questions. What are my biggest insecurities? What am I afraid of? Why do I hate this person? Why am I annoyed at this? What's in my control? What can I do today to make my day good? Guys, do yourself a favor and start journaling today. The second thing I want you to do for the domain of the mind is to learn to let go. Awa Kenzo was an archery master, and the most important lesson he taught to his students was detachment. He used to say what's standing in your way is thinking too much at the target at hand. What we need in life is to be loose and flexible, so that way we can go to any place we need to be without our desires and outcomes getting in the way. Mastering our mental domain requires us to take a step back from the word mastery. We can do this by taking a step back from the results and taking a step into the long process day in and day out. We think better when we don't think so hard. Think about it like this: when you play sports, you don't think at all. You just allow yourself to flow in the nature of the sport and let your body take itself action by action, step by step, without a thought in mind. This is the kind of stillness that Awa Kenzo was talking about. If we aim for the trophy in life, we'll miss the target. We will neglect the process and the art required to hit it. Forget about the goal. By practicing, the trophy will find its way to you. Even though it's not the trophy you always wanted, it was the self-respect and admiration you had for yourself on the long journey that you put in. Principle number 2, the domain of the soul. Since ancient times, we have strived to train and control the drives deep inside of us, so that one day we can find serenity and serve our goals and protect our accomplishments. Our soul resembles a wild beast that we are trying to tame. With self-awareness, patience, and perseverance, we are able to tame the emotions and drives inside of us. Let me ask you something. What good does it do if you're rational at work if your home is full of disasters? We can't separate the domains of the mind and the soul, because even if your mind is right, your soul can take you adrift and make you miserable. Just like Tiger Woods, who won multiple golf championships and made millions of dollars with his mind, but his soul led him to cheating and losing $100 million lawsuit to his wife. The next step we must take is more spiritual than cerebral, because it is our soul that will give us happiness, contentment, and self-respect in ourselves. We must develop a strong moral compass, stay away from envy and pleasures, enter loving relationships, and accept a higher power beyond our comprehension. For this domain, the first thing I want you to do is to heal your inner child. You see, many of us carry wounds from our childhood. Maybe someone didn't treat us right, or we never got the acceptance of our parents, or we got traumatized and we chose to ignore it than face it. If you know what your case is, then you should be relieved, because now you know where the source of anxiety and worry is coming from in your life. The reason we get so frustrated from certain situations or have trouble taking accountability and criticism in our lives is because that 6-year-old in you never got the proper attention it needed. I'll give you an example. Rick Ankiel was one of the best pitchers that baseball ever had. He had a really bad upbringing from an abusive father and a brother who was a drug dealer. Just days before his first playoff game, he lost the ability to control his pitches. What happened is that he found out his brother and father went to jail on drug charges. And when he saw them in the courtroom, all his childhood pain came back because he was ignoring it his whole life. It took him years to recover and get his pitching abilities back, but unfortunately, he switched to an outfield center position, the position furthest away from the mound. So what chip are you carrying on your shoulder? What insecurity are you holding deep inside of you? Did your parents' nasty divorce leave you alone, anxious, and scared? Did your father never accept you? Do you feel like a victim from your childhood? Well, you're gonna have to dig deep and find out why and find peace within that. Otherwise, you'll create a monster inside of you that hides these deep insecurities only to pass them on to your loved ones. How much better do you think life would be if you didn't see it from the perspective of a scared little child and needs you to reassure it that everything's gonna be okay? This way, your functional adult self steps in and tells your mental health that everything can still be good and calm. I want you to remember this formula for the antidote. Give more, give what you didn't get, love more, drop the old story. Because you owe it to yourself to break the chain of life's continuous suffering from generation to generation. Will you be the reason that your future kids grow up anxious and worried? Or will you be the reason that they grow up full of love and high self-esteem? Now, the next challenge I'm going to ask you to do will be the hardest challenge for some of you. And I know as soon as you hear this, you're going to shut the video off and just be so turned off. But I need you to hear me out on all my points before you come to a conclusion. That's all I ask. The next thing I want you to do is accept a higher power. In Alcoholics Anonymous, do you know what the second step is? It's acknowledging the existence of a higher power. It's not about believing in God and religion, but it's about surrender and faith. Remember when I told you Awa Kanzo, the master archer, taught his students to let go at a deep fundamental level? Well, this is kind of the same. By accepting a higher power, the addict understands that they are not God, and many of these things are outside of their control. Only by accepting God for what it is, whether it's destiny, luck, randomness, Buddha, whatever you believe in, by acknowledging this higher power, you can access mental clarity, peace, and stillness, because that means there's less battles to fight in the world. Not everything is in our control. In fact, the Stoics always reminded us that the only things that we can control is our thoughts and our actions. Everything else we have no say or control over, like the weather, other people's behavior, and your ethnicity. Accepting this fact as a natural order of the universe will allow your inner spiritual self begin its healing. Don't get me wrong, science is important, skepticism is important, pragmatism, realism, and I encourage all of you to practice these things. But you have to believe in something, you just do. Otherwise, the world is just so cold and empty. Even if we all are a product of evolution and randomness, the laws that we count on, such as gravity and physics, are we not already accepting a higher power by accepting these laws? We have little to no control what happens in this world that would happen exactly as if there were a God. Let this higher power enter your heart, that's all I'm asking. But if you can't, if you feel discouraged, that's okay too, because God is always there waiting for you, but you have to take the first step. Principle number 3, the domain of the body. The first thing I want you to do is to rise above your physical limitations by finding a physical hobby. Remember when I said balling up your emotions can destroy you inside and make you do something you regret in the future? Well, as men, we need to stay sharp and think without making our decisions on pure emotions. For me, there's nothing I look more forward to than beating the shit out of the heavy bag in my boxing gym. I know any extra emotions I have bottled up for that day will be let out on the heavy bag because it can absorb any force I put onto it. By immersing myself in these exercises, I am allowing my anger to channel in a healthy way where I feel 100 times better after the exercise. The second thing I want you to do is to build a disciplined routine. A good routine is the platform from which stimulating and fulfilling work is possible. Routine done sincerely and long enough becomes ritual. Eisenhower defined freedom as an opportunity for self-discipline. Most successful people engage in routines. These talented athletes are prisoners to their routines. Why? Because the greats know that complete freedom is a nightmare. They know that order is a prerequisite for excellence and good habits are the safe haven of certainty. Most people wake up and face their day with endless choices. What do I wear today? What do I eat? What should I do? Who should I see? These endless choices are exhausting and can make our lives very chaotic. Please avoid that by building a routine that you love. The last thing I want you to do, which is in my opinion the most important, is to seek solitude. When Leonardo da Vinci was working on the Last Supper, he would wake up early and get at the monastery before his assistants or spectators just so he can be alone in solitude with the creative challenge of the painting in front of him. It's hard to think clearly with rooms filled with people. It's hard to understand yourself if you're never by yourself. If your life is a constant go from home to work to school to jobs to sports to your phone to whatever it is, how do you expect to ever find insight to your problems if you're always distracting yourself? Sometimes we must disconnect with the outside world so we can connect to our inner self and the people we love. Trust me on this, go to bed 2 hours earlier than you usually do and have the morning to yourself. rather than just rush and scroll and eat. Remember that as men, we tend to only focus on the physical aspect of our well-being. We tend to ignore 2/3 of our options. So remember that this is a long process and you're not going to get better overnight, but I promise you, if you show up every day and try your very best, you will start to see changes, positive changes, and you will get better. If you like these principles, then I'll be sure to check out Ryan Holiday's book, Stillness is the Key, as I got all the principles and beautiful lessons from his book. So I will link that down below in my video. If you enjoyed this video, please like and comment down below, and I will be sure to talk about more strategies on our overall mental and physical well-being.